Monza, the temple of speed, a circuit where legends are made and sometimes lost. From the roaring tifosi waving Ferrari flags to some of the darkest days in Formula One's history, this track has seen it all. In 1955, Ferrari lost their two-time world champion in a fatal crash. In 1961, a championship fight turned into tragedy as cars flew into the crowd. And in recent years, Monza became the stage for unforgettable drama. Charles Leclerc's emotional home victories in 2019 and again in 2024, and the chaotic clash between Max and Lewis in 2021. Today, we're reliving Monza's greatest moments, the highs, the heartbreaks, and the races that changed Formula One forever. The 1961 Formula One season had been building towards a dramatic conclusion. Ferrari entered the year with one of the most dominant cars on the grid, the Ferrari 156 Shark Nose. Their drivers were leading the way in the World Championship. Among them, Wolfgang von Trips, a German driver who had developed into a serious title contender, and American Phil Hill, his Ferrari teammate and rival. The Tifosi had every reason to believe that a Ferrari driver would be crowned champion that season. But there was another name that began to enter the picture, a young Scottish driver by the name of Jim Clark. Driving for Lotus, Clark was rapidly building a reputation as one of the most talented newcomers in the sport. He and von Trips clashed on track more than once during 1961, with Clark's aggressive but precise driving style unsettling the Germans' push for the championship. That rivalry came to a head at Monza, in front of Ferrari's home crowd, with the world title hanging in the balance. On the opening lap of the Italian Grand Prix, disaster struck. Heading into the high-speed Parabolica section, von Trips and Clark made contact. Von Trips's Ferrari was launched into the air, colliding with the fencing and breaking apart violently. His car careered into the crowd at unimaginable speed, and in just a few horrifying seconds, Formula One witnessed one of the darkest moments in its history. Von Trips was killed instantly, along with 15 spectators, with dozens more injured. The collision had turned the championship decider into a tragedy on a scale rarely seen in the sport. The final death toll stood at 16 lives lost, including one of Ferrari's brightest stars. For Ferrari, the result was a strange and haunting paradox. Phil Hill went on to win the race, and with it, the 1961 World Championship. But Hill celebrated in silence, overshadowed by the deaths that had occurred only meters from the circuit. What should have been a crowning achievement became a day etched into history for all the wrong reasons. The aftermath of the von Trips disaster forced Formula One to confront safety in a way it had long ignored. Grandstands had been placed dangerously close to high-speed sections of the circuit. Barriers were crude and ineffective, and drivers were left with no protection against the kind of forces unleashed in such accidents. The Monza crash highlighted just how unprepared the sport was to deal with the consequences of racing at ever-increasing speeds. Alberto Ascari was one of Ferrari's first true icons, a two-time world champion in 1952 and 1953. He established himself as the dominant force of the early 1950s. With a remarkable streak of 9 consecutive victories, Ascari set a benchmark that stood unmatched for decades, proving his skill and consistency at a time when reliability and survival were often less important than outright speed. To Italy, he was more than a champion, he was a national hero. As an Italian driver, winning in an Italian car, Ascari represented pride, passion, and the spirit of Ferrari itself. But on May 26, 1955, tragedy struck at Monza. While conducting private testing in a Ferrari sports car, Ascari lost control at a fast corner that would later bear his name, the Ascari chicane. The car veered off the circuit and crashed violently, leaving him with fatal injuries. In a single moment, Ferrari lost its greatest star, and Italy lost its most celebrated driver. The impact of Ascari's death was immense. His loss reminded the racing world of the brutal risks that defined the sport in its early years. Cars of that era offered almost no protection, no modern safety cells, no fireproof gear. In many cases, not even proper seat belts. Drivers sat inches away from powerful engines, surrounded by fragile metal frames, and accepted that one mistake or mechanical failure could end everything. Ascari's death showed that even the most skilled and successful drivers were vulnerable. Monza itself became a place of mourning. The Tifosi, who had idolized Ascari, saw their hero taken from them at the very circuit that symbolized Ferrari's dominance. His death was treated in Italy as a national tragedy, covered on front pages with the same weight as the passing of a statesman. The corner where the accident occurred was later named in his memory, ensuring that every lap around Monza would carry a reminder of the risks and the sacrifices made in pursuit of speed. Though Formula One would not see major safety reforms for many years, moments like Ascari's accident planted the first seeds of change. The loss of a national hero forced both Ferrari and the sport to confront the dangers more directly. It was an early and sobering lesson that the temple of speed demanded a heavy price, and it set the tone for decades of tragedy and progress that followed. The 2000 Formula One season was one of the most intense in years. Michael Schumacher and Ferrari were locked in a championship fight with Mika Häkkinen and McLaren, and every race felt like it could swing the momentum one way or the other. By the time the circus arrived at Monza, Ferrari's home ground, the Tifosi were desperate for a win to keep their hero's title campaign alive. But nobody could have predicted just how chaotic and tragic this Grand Prix would become. Right from the start, the Italian Grand Prix exploded into chaos, and within seconds, half the field seemed to be involved in a massive pileup. Jarno Trulli, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Mika Salo, Pedro Della Rosa, Rubens Barrichello. Cars went spinning, colliding, breaking apart in every direction. It was the kind of crash that instantly silences a crowd. The type of first-lap mess where you hold your breath until the dust clears, and the cameras confirm who's still moving. But the real tragedy wasn't in the cars. As wheels and debris scattered across the runoff, one of the detached wheels from Della Rosa's car flew violently through the fencing and struck volunteer Marshal Paolo Gislimberti. Despite immediate medical attention, he was killed. It was an awful reminder of the risks that not only drivers, but also the men and women protecting the circuit faced in those days. Gislimberti was just 33 years old. His death cast a shadow over the entire event. The race itself continued after the restart, but the atmosphere never recovered. Michael Schumacher drove brilliantly, holding off both McLarens and crossed the line to take victory for Ferrari in front of the ecstatic Tifosi. The track was stormed almost instantly by thousands of fans, turning the podium celebration into chaos. But the contrast couldn't have been sharper. The Tifosi celebrated wildly, while the paddock quietly mourned the loss of a marshal who had been standing only meters away from the action. That victory was historic in another way. It marked Schumacher's 41st career win, equaling the record held by Ayrton Senna. And then came the moment nobody expected. In the post-race press conference, when Schumacher was asked about matching Senna,
A lot to me.
he broke down in tears, barely able to speak as he thought about the Brazilian's legacy. It was a rare moment, the usually cold and focused champion, letting the world see just how much the sport's history and its dangers truly weighed on him. The 2021 Formula One season is remembered as one of the most explosive title fights in modern history. On one side, you had Lewis Hamilton, already a 7-time world champion, a driver many considered untouchable, operating at his absolute peak. On the other side was Max Verstappen, younger, hungrier, absolutely fearless, and making sure every single race weekend turned into a street fight. This wasn't just a battle of cars, it was a clash of generations, a duel for the crown of who truly was the best. When the calendar rolled into Monza, tensions were already boiling over. Mercedes and Red Bull had been trading blows all season, from Bahrain to Silverstone, and every lap felt like a chapter in a rivalry that was escalating far too quickly. The Italian Grand Prix was supposed to be another dogfight, and it delivered, just not in the way anyone wanted. Verstappen's race started to unravel in the pits. A painfully slow stop from Red Bull left him rejoining the track late. Then, after Lewis Hamilton's pit stop, the two championship rivals found themselves side by side heading down to the Retifilo chicane. And here's the thing, there was no way either driver was going to lift. Both of them had too much pride, too much at stake, too much history already written in 2021 to back out. Into turn 1, Hamilton held the inside. Verstappen tried to hang it around the outside. His Red Bull was launched into the air. The car literally climbed on top of the Mercedes. Verstappen's rear tire slammed down directly on Hamilton's cockpit. This was the kind of crash that freezes everyone. For a second, the world held its breath. Max's car perched on top of Lewis's Mercedes, tire resting on his helmet. And instantly, the world realized what could have happened without the halo device. Just 4 years earlier, that crash could have been fatal. Instead, the halo took the full force, saving Hamilton's life, proving once and for all why that safety innovation had been worth every debate, every controversy, and every bit of pushback it faced when first introduced. Both cars were out of the race instantly, the title fight temporarily paused by a wreck that looked like something out of a nightmare. Fans in Monza, already split between the orange army of Verstappen supporters and the global following of Hamilton, were left stunned. The aftermath fueled weeks of arguments, finger-pointing, endless slow-motion replays, Everyone debated who was to blame, but one fact couldn't be argued. Formula One had just witnessed one of the most dramatic and terrifying collisions between two title contenders in decades. And thanks to the halo, it wasn't remembered as a tragedy. The 2021 Monza crash became symbolic of that entire season, two drivers unwilling to yield, two teams locked in combat, and a sport walking the razor's edge, between breathtaking competition and disaster. Monza is Ferrari's temple, and for almost a decade, the Tifosi had been praying without miracles. Since Alonso's win in 2010, Ferrari showed up every year with smoke bombs, flags, endless hope, only to watch Red Bull and Mercedes bully them around. It became tradition. The fans invaded the track no matter what. But instead of celebrating wins, they were basically mourning what used to be. Then, 2019 happened, and Charles Leclerc flipped the script. He put the Ferrari on pole. And suddenly, all of Italy decided to believe again. But race day wasn't some easy cruise. He had Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas behind him, in cars that were objectively faster. And for the next 53 laps, it turned into survival mode. Hamilton threw everything at him. DRS, dive bomb attempts, relentless pressure. And Leclerc just said no, lap after lap. With the calm of someone way older than 21, Bottas tried his luck too. But Leclerc kept both silver arrows behind, and crossed the line first. The crowd went feral, track invasion, flags everywhere, Tifosi chanting his name like he was a rock star. In one afternoon, Leclerc went from Ferrari's young hope to their new messiah. Fast forward to 2024, and Monza delivered another script straight out of Hollywood. Ferrari weren't even the best car that year. McLaren had taken over as the fastest, but Leclerc didn't care. He rolled the dice on a one-stop strategy, nursing his tires like they were made of glass, while the papaya cars hunted him down. Everyone assumed the Ferrari would collapse in the final laps, but somehow, Leclerc held on. Just enough pace, just enough nerve, and when he crossed the line, the place exploded again. Another invasion, another sea of red flooding the track. Tifosi acting like he'd just been elected president of Italy. That second Monza win confirmed it wasn't just luck in 2019. Leclerc was the guy who could take Ferrari to glory at home, even when the odds weren't in his favor. At Monza, some drivers survive, some drivers win, but Leclerc has done both, while carrying the weight of Ferrari on his shoulders. That's why for the Tifosi, he isn't just Charles Leclerc, he's the chosen one. Monza really is just built different. Every time Formula One rolls in, something happens that sticks with fans forever. Sometimes it's heartbreaking, sometimes it's pure chaos, and sometimes it's that fairy tale moment every Tifosi dreams about. That's why people call it the Temple of Speed, because it's more than just a fast circuit, it's the place where emotions run higher than the revs. And honestly, that's why Monza will always matter in F1.